So good morning. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate your coming. I think this is going to be a lot of fun today. I certainly had a lot of fun putting this together. There's a lot to evidence-based health communication, as Rebecca said. So I'm going to hit on things kind of lightly in a sort of a survey way, and I'm going to probably talk a little fast. But that's so that we can still have some time at the end for questions. And of course, I am very happy to talk about this anytime, afterwards or by phone or whatever. So please always feel free to contact me. So using a project we did for the Department of Health as an example, today I'm going to talk about how evidence-based campaigns work. You can find much of the messaging for this campaign at 11years.org. It was essentially a persuasion campaign to convince 3 segments of Vermonters to get their HIV test. So let's start with this. Here are a few facts about HIV and AIDS from the CDC. This is obviously a really serious health problem, but it also has significant financial implications. And in that way, it has a lot in common with a lot of public health issues. So this brings up some questions. Do you want to leave this problem to chance, this or any public health problem? Do you ever think that in public health communication we could be doing better, making more progress? My talk today is about evidence-based health communication, but I'm really talking about getting better results, and specifically about knowing why or you got those results, or whatever they are, good or bad, so that you can improve in the future. And that is all really about this very simple idea. I'm going to hit on this a lot today. Science is beautiful. Something that's not quite as beautiful, opinion. Opinion, just one of the beautiful things about using the evidence-based approach is it reduces the size of the dance floor on which opinion can move. It kind of helps keep it out of the room. And opinion is best summed up by these 2 words that I'm sure you've heard many times before, I think. Possibly the 2 most dangerous words in health communication. What you think, I hate to tell you this, is probably wrong. What I think is probably wrong. It's really what the research says, and that's kind of a recurring theme today too. You may recall, those of you of a certain age, the cartoon character Pogo, his famous line, "We met the enemy and he is us." Our personal experiences and our perceptions can be very misleading. This is because human behavior is not intuitive. And I'm going to emphasize that a lot today too. In my experience in talking with people about behavior science, that's probably the single biggest obstacle for them to understand that human behavior is not logical or linear or intuitive. That's a simple concept, but we don't want to believe it. But the truth is we don't think the way we think we think. This isn't to say we can't at times be logical or linear. It's to say that well, of course we can. There are a lot of obstacles between what we think and the actions that we may or may not take. So the minute we accept we're not necessarily logical, then things get really interesting and exciting. Behavior science is not astrophysics. It's not complicated in that way. As Rebecca said, it's definitely a process. But it's a simple idea overall that just takes a bunch of getting used to. Evolutionary psychologist Jeffrey Miller from the University of New Mexico talks about this in his book Spent. And this is not so much about health behavior at all. In fact, it's about consumer behavior. But it really hits on the idea that we make decisions based on things that were going on hundreds of millions of years ago in our genetic makeup. The good news is we can, another actually book you might have seen somewhere in the past is Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely from Dugan. So the good news is we can convince people to do things, and we can convince ourselves to take more pro-health, pro-environmental actions. The evidence-based process helps us do that. Evidence-based health communication is a segment of what Rebecca was talking about. She was talking about a bigger world, a multi-level world of things you have to do to get behavior change. I'm talking about a piece of that world, which is communication. It's not one tool in a series of choices. It's sort of an underlying framework for any kind of communication you might do. community-based social marketing, TV ads, radio ads, posters, even logos. All of this can be informed by the evidence-based health communication process. And it's essentially a framework that helps you create persuasive appeals and then measure the effectiveness of those appeals. And so today I'm going to be talking about these 4 subject areas. What's the problem? Different cultures, different outcomes, the evidence-based approach. That part may bore you a little bit, but I'm going to race through that one. Things to do, things not to do. So before I go further, you got a brief introduction about me. I'm a writer and producer who's created thousands of messages. I know how to do it the wrong way. I only took a couple of decades of work to realize that we really weren't doing it right. And as a greater part of all that, the ad industry really isn't doing it right. And the problem beyond that is the ad agency perspective is woven into the way we think about communication. If we have a communication problem, we think we want to talk to an ad agency about it. If we can't afford an ad agency, we want to think like an ad agency. So we're all kind of operating under a set of broad misassumptions about how to change behavior. So with that said, I'm going to use different examples today to show you what I mean, and I'm going to pick on the ad industry, the Keep America Beautiful campaign, Efficiency Vermont, City of Buffalo, and the state of California, and make a few enemies. I hope they can all forgive me. We are all on the same side after all. So the ad agency slash I think syndrome leads to unintended consequences, sometimes ones that are the exact opposite of what you're trying to accomplish. I want to emphasize that in trying to make something better, you can absolutely make it worse. Here are some examples. So first of all, let's start with this guy in the upper left, Iron Eyes Cody. Those of you of a certain age probably know who he is. He told us not to litter back in the 1970s. In his ad, he paddles his canoe down a trash-filled river. He walks up a trash-filled embankment, and he gets trash thrown at his feet. And then we see a tear roll down his cheek. Well, Robert Cialdini of Arizona State has written that this ad most likely encouraged littering. It's counterintuitive. This is because it showed littering as a norm. And there's trash everywhere in the ad, like I just said. And what stands in opposition to this trash? This guy dressed in a Halloween costume paddling an outdated boat. And he's alone in this ad. He's an outsider. So with that in mind, take a look at the ad.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can stop it.
This guy up here, the Grim Reaper, he's from a anti-AIDS campaign from Australia in the 1980s. This campaign as well probably did a lot more harm than good. Because, according to some researchers, it scared the pants off of people. In this ad, I can't really act it out for you since I'm not much of an actor, people are lowered as if they're bowling pins onto a bowling alley, and there's all this atmospheric fog blowing around, and the Grim Reaper's the bowler, and he knocks over all these people, and you see a woman trying to protect her child, and really scared faces, and it's very frightening, and it probably scared the pants off of people, and that's not an unintended pun. It was trying to prevent AIDS. It probably did not, because it scared people so much that they ignored it. The only time you'd maybe watch this ad is on Halloween. You're going to see it once, you're going to block out the message. That's the extended parallel process model is what we're talking about. If you don't supply a form of efficacy, an easy solution, that the person perceives as a doable solution, they're going to tune out the message.
At first, only gays and IV drug users were being killed by AIDS. But now we know every one of us could be devastated by it. The fact is, over 50,000 men, women, and children now carry the AIDS virus. That in 3 years, nearly 2,000 of us will be dead. That if not stopped, it could kill more Australians than World War II. But AIDS can be stopped, and you can help stop it. If you have sex, have just one safe partner, or always use condoms. Always.
For some perspective, obviously in the 1980s, about all you could do is not have sex to avoid AIDS. It's a bit of an overstatement. Obviously, condoms were there were no, as you know, there were no particular treatments. So my point is, in a planet that, even since the 1980s, I mean, we've probably added 1 billion people or something like that. We're going to have sex, and that's one of the things we're good at. So the point is, that you can't tell people not to do that. They're going to make a choice, a dangerous choice. The last one I want to hit on is we don't have an ad for that one, the PETA ads. You've probably seen those people for the ethical treatment of animals. They've been running the I'd rather go naked than wear fur campaign for at least 20 years. And it's widely hailed as a success, except it's not. If you look at the figures, I'm sure it's won a lot of awards in the ad business. If you look at the figures, fur sales track with the weather and they track with the economy. They do not track with PETA ads. And there was another study among college students, interestingly enough, who said that one of the problems with this campaign was that because they use scantily clad or naked women for the most part, it robs the messages of credibility. I respect the college students for having that insight. Switching gears a bit, this is a white paper I did about energy conservation, and in one study, what I found doing the research for this, researchers found that in identical homes in a development, energy use varied by as much as 300% depending on the household. So if you think about the cash for Cocker's stimulus money early in the Obama administration, the push to get our homes retrofitted and air sealed and all the money that's gone into that, tax dollars, what if efficiency is really more about behavior? So among the paper's conclusions was that without a behavior component to this, we could be building a country full of efficient homes peopled by inefficient people. So behavior really, really matters. And this one I like a lot. Time magazine, May 4th, 2014. Last summer, coastal Southern California has some of the most cutting-edge water use policies, yet this region used 8% more water this past May than they had in the previous 3 years on average. So as the rhetoric about the drought got louder, these people used more water. Well, that doesn't make any sense, right? Well, to behavior scientists, it does. It's the scarcity principle. People are saying, I better fill the pool and wash my car and scrub Fluffy the dog before we're all out of water. So it's really interesting because the headline is even the governor can't convince Californians to take their drought seriously enough. And so the article is from the people quoted in the article to the editor at Time, they're kind of missing the point because, again, behavior is not intuitive. Californians are taking the drought very, very seriously. That's why they're acting the way they're acting. So the point is, don't yell louder. People will just use more water. Try a new approach. And one of my behavior heroes is Robert Cialdini. So he did an experiment at the Petrified Forest in Arizona. As you know, it's a place where trees turned into stone. And it's a very popular activity for tourists to go there and steal pieces of the Petrified Forest. Apparently 14 tons a year disappear. So there are signs at the park, and they say, please don't steal. Everybody's stealing our forest. It's not going to be here anymore. Hey, what's going on? Well, maybe that'll go away when I flip next. Anyway, the point being that these signs unintentionally encouraged a norm. Again, it's the scarcity principle. So what Cialdini and his compatriots did in this particular experiment, thank you, Tina, I'm so happy you hung around, is they changed the signage, and they made theft a solitary crime. They didn't say everybody's stealing our forest. They basically reduced it to an outsider activity, and consequently theft in the forest decreased dramatically. Now, the PSA I'm about to show you, you won't, actually doesn't really matter because there's no speaking in it, it's mostly graphic, we did for the American Lung Association of the Northeast. And it was for the, to help promote the anti-idling law that went into effect about a year ago. In designing this concept, we were really concerned about a significant issue known as psychological reactance, or is termed by Nyan and Riefler of Dartmouth the backfire effect. The idea is that when you present someone with new information that's contrary to their beliefs, you can actually strengthen their pre-existing incorrect beliefs. In this case, people think that idling their car is good for their car. They think if they don't have their car idled in the morning, they'll get into that passenger compartment and then die because apparently it's terribly cold. Obviously, these are incorrect beliefs, but you don't want to reconfirm those by actually telling somebody not to do it that way. So we took a norming approach. We didn't say a thing about this new restriction on people's freedom, so to speak. We're just going to show the desired behavior and have people in the ad give their reasons for not idling, and that was it. So watch what happens in the spot. People repeatedly turn off their engines. That's it. According to theory, over time, this will have an effect on people's behavior. Not idling your engine will become the new norm. Norming language in there, and it's a very easy thing that people can do. Next, let's talk about a hero in the public health world, Jenny McCarthy. It's really easy to blame people who think they're smarter than science and to disparage them. But the point is this: it's a complicated world and information competes for our attention every day. So behavior science says, don't debate with Jenny McCarthy. People have an endless reservoir of quasi-facts to draw on. And this reservoir, by the way, is a lot more about their self-image and their tribal identification than it is about facts. Think about climate debates, things like that. So the point is, if you're not careful what you say in your campaign, you can harden people's incorrect beliefs, like arguing with Ms. McCarthy. Because people are always going to say, well, I know this, or somebody told me that, who's a credible source. And Nyan and Riefler have actually done some really interesting work on this in the world of immunizations as well, which is a big issue, and it's going to be a bigger issue, and it's going to be really interesting to see how we can solve that one. This is a piece from a proposal we put together for a different challenge and therefore a different solution. Arizona wants its citizens to get serious about water consumption. The standard advertising industry approach might be to inform people about the problem. Well, we did some research, and what a surprise, Arizonans know about their water problem. If they didn't, California's next door, and so they hear about it a lot. So, as we learned from the extended parallel process model, about all you can do is frighten people into inaction by getting them to avoid the situation. So, what can you do, particularly since genetically we humans are programmed to think about the next hour, not 50 years from now? Well, there's research out there from Samantha Neufeld of Arizona State, among others, that indicates that baby images can cause people to think about and act on future concerns. So we created a campaign that pairs baby images with humor to create a mental opening to get people thinking about water, not about water, but about babies, about the future. Thinking about water is not going to get you much anywhere, was the point. So anyway, all this behavior science is really cool. right? So why do we keep making all these wrong decisions when it comes to creating messaging? There are a couple of reasons. The AIDA, you've probably never heard of. I hadn't for years and years. It's basically the ad industry model, and everyone in the ad industry kind of is taught this way. I was taught this way. AIDA stands for the process of awareness, to interest, to desire, to action. It sounds really logical. Problem is, humans don't work that way. It's an entirely illogical model. And this leads to two other things. The big idea, or what I call the pill in the hamburger approach. If you think awareness is all you need to accomplish with your audience, then you're going to do your best to get their attention. And so you're going to make ads that get people's attention. You're going to dress a chicken in a spandex suit, you're going to put them on a rocket ship, and people are going to go, oh, that's really funny. That leads to the hamburger and the pill in the hamburger approach. If you've ever fed your dog his pill in the hamburger, he loves the hamburger, right? But a lot of the time, what does he do with the pill? Exactly. So we may love an ad, but it doesn't mean it had any effect on us. So the dog loves the big idea. So let's consider this. Our genus has been around for hundreds of millions of years. Social cognitive theory, which is a social learning theory, becomes clear if you picture yourself as a proto-human out on the savannah and you come upon a group of people, your clan's people, and they're all eating this root. And you've never seen this root before and you don't know if this root's healthy, but they're eating it, so it must be, so you feel you can eat that root. Now, if you think we're past all that, if you think we're in a Cartesian, Descartes there, Enlightenment mindset, picture yourself in this situation. There are two ticket windows at a movie theater. There's a line of 10 people at one of them. There's nobody at the other one. Which one are you more likely to get in line for? Even if you get in line where there's no line, you're feeling social pressure. You don't know why you're feeling this social pressure, but there are 10 people in the other line. You know, are you doing something wrong? Is there something wrong with that ticket window? So these things, you know, you don't get rid of these things with you know, 400 years or so since the Enlightenment. These are a big part of our genetic makeup. And interestingly, I think one of the biggest things that gets in the way there is our culture is kind of infused with deistic notions as though we are exceptional, even though we know where we came from evolutionarily. There's still this strong notion of human exceptionalism as though we're kind of blessed by God, separate from biology. And interestingly enough, that notion is actually pre-Christian. It goes all the way back to Aristotle, who we're going to talk to in a moment here. Okay, I'm going to say a couple things about the advertising industry, but I want to state first, and I want to state unequivocally, I think the ad industry is a really good place to sell products and services. I think it's a really good model for that. But behavior change is different. There are some very significant differences, and here's a summation. See how fast you can read. The need to survive in a capitalistic economy leads to the Lake Wobegon effect, where every ad agency claims to be above average. But it's hard for an ad agency to show a clear relationship between what they've done and what happens with the intended audiences, because the tools just aren't there to measure it. So awards are a proxy for proof of success, and there are hundreds of award shows out there. Even though Ad Age magazine, the industry Bible, says more than one time that there's no connection between awards and effectiveness of campaigns. But by far the biggest issue is this: behavior change is not a product. That's why I say the ad industry is a really good model for a certain set of things. I just don't believe it's a good set. It's a good model for behavior change. You can't sell it the way you sell Coke. Techniques and the tools are totally different. So let's talk about that for just a second. Words can persuade. They're very powerful. And persuasion is more than a noun. It's an area of academic research and inquiry. Any idea how long people have been studying persuasion? As long as they've been making marble busts out of people, or of people. One of the most widely read works in history is Aristotle's Rhetoric. It was essentially a series of lessons for his students in persuasion, a critical art of discourse in Athenian life in 400 BC or so. Since the 1900s, though, persuasion has been studied using scientific methods, quantified, if you will, and perhaps the biggest motivator for social scientists to study persuasion was the World War I, the unprecedented waste of lives and money got social scientists really excited about, we got to not have this happen again. Of course, World War II came along, so they weren't entirely successful yet. But one of the pioneers of persuasion scientists was Yale's Carl Hovland. And World War II brought a lot of funding, as you know, wars often do, to nice things, which was basically the behavior work that he was doing at Yale. And part of it resulted in the Why We Fight series and a lot of other media pieces that he created for the U.S. Armed Forces, American propaganda. But it also resulted in a lot of insights about persuasion and behavior change. He continued this work in the decades after the war. And today, thousands of academics and produce hundreds of research papers every year on persuasion and behavior science. So fast forward to today. This is the part I'm going to really try to go fast through, like I warned you about earlier. How do we undertake, maybe you'll find this interesting. If you do, you can ask me questions afterwards, because I find it interesting, but I try to have respect for the audience. How do we undertake the process of creating an evidence-based health communication campaign? This is a Reader's Digest version, but it covers the basics. So number one, you do a literature review. This is by far the most important thing. This T-Rex is posing next to the journal articles we pulled in the research phase of the HIV testing campaign. There are about 100 of them. So why do you do a literature review? You do a literature review because a lot of people have discovered a lot of things about your subject already, and you don't want to recreate knowledge. You got a limited budget. You want to devote that to creating new knowledge. So in the literature, you find all kinds of neat things. You find studies and scales and surveys and persuasion theories, and you might be able to use these in your project. You also find that someone might have done a very similar project somewhere else, either through a university or other organization, and they'll tell you exactly how they did it so that you can follow their blueprint. So what makes up a good literature review? Published journal articles are the gold standard. Don't do a Google search. A Google Scholar search will get you much closer. But that'll mostly get you to restricted journal articles, so you need access to academic databases. I think the health department has some limited access. If not, maybe your alma mater does. Some do. It's hard, but it's really helpful. Use original sources, not news articles. You can always count on the press to oversimplify. Number two, do your own research. Learn about your audience's knowledge, opinions, and behaviors. The literature review can inform that process greatly, help you decide what questions to ask. Focus groups, interviews, surveys, in case I didn't mention that a moment ago, that's what I mean by that. But do it to compare with the literature review. Local populations do differ from outside populations. For instance, think about the Republican Party in Vermont versus the Republican Party in Texas. Even if they had the same ideologies, everything would be different. Colloquialisms, the way they dress. I haven't seen a lot of cowboy boots on people in Vermont. And those things end up mattering in the end. So number three, segment your audience. Segmentation is extremely important. For instance, in the HIV project, we found younger urban audiences much more receptive to being tested than older rural ones. So stigma worked very differently for the two groups, as did insurance concerns. As you can imagine, younger people have more expensive and sometimes more difficult to access insurance than older, more established people often do. Number four, pick a measure that's really important. Otherwise, it's too easy to declare victory and go home. It's actually not hard. You have to be a little bit clever, but you can always pick a measure. For the HIV project, we picked a measure called intention to test, and we used website analytics to gauge it. Choose the health behavior theory or theories best suited for your campaign. These are actually the ones that we found, that we used for the HIV campaign, and you never find this stuff unless you do your lit review. And why do you use behavior theories? Because decades of research into human behavior have yielded invaluable insights that can make all the difference in your campaign. Number six, write and produce your messages. 7, test your messages. 8, revise if necessary. non-release and post-test based on your measure, and produce publishable results. You know, you don't have to publish in a journal. It's really hard to do that, but if you kind of set that bar for yourself, the next person in your seat is going to be able to follow your recipe. They're going to be able to use your data. They're going to be able to understand what you did and be able to improve on what you did. So it's really important to leave a good record of that. So what's all this get you? You're not expected to be able to read all that. If you do, you have excellent eyesight. But this is this is a chart that represents how our HIV campaign worked. These are various messages broken down by medium and behavior theory and target audience and message, and different behavior theories were used at different points in the campaign, all with the goal of getting site visitors to click on information regarding free testing locations. In other words, intention to test. So I am going to actually skip over, in the interest of time, one of the 12 messages from the campaign, partly because words are very important in it. But every word in this particular spot that I would have shown relates in some way to our research findings. So I might be able to squeeze it in. Let's see. But there are some words here that are printed on the screen.
If we could go back in time, we'd all change a few things. We can't time travel, but we can get tested for HIV. The difference between HIV and AIDS is about 11 years. That's the average time it takes HIV to turn into AIDS. So the past really does matter. The Centers for Disease Control and the Vermont Department of Health recommend HIV testing for every sexually active adult. Everyone. You can get tested with your doctor, or testing is free, anonymous, and available at nearly 40 locations around Vermont.
Basically, the announcer's telling people 11 years matters, because 11 years is the average amount of time that it takes for HIV to turn into AIDS. It's a surprising thing that we found out through our process of focus groups and key informant interviews. So the idea was to create in people's minds a little bit of doubt. Guess what? You may have had something you weren't so sure about 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. This is something you should think about in terms of being HIV tested. So anyway, last part of my talk. Things to do to change the world. If you're working with outside vendors and you're writing the RFP or managing the project, here are some recommendations. Number one, most RFPs are still written basically for ad agencies to use traditional advertising methods to change behaviors. So I want to give you a few examples from RFPs that have popped up on my radar screen in the last year or so. But they're really representative of the vast majority of RFPs. They're all good causes and they all involve in behavior change, but because they're not using an evidence-based process, their prospects for creating that change aren't really all that good. We don't need George yet. There was a recent RFP here in Vermont, and it was a very recent actually, and it was a project that had two issues. First, the project itself was based on assumptions. Now, assumptions are really dangerous. Assumptions lead you to not consider the root of the issue, to start building your boat in midstream, so to speak. But there was a second problem with it as well, which you see a lot, and it's the company that was chosen would be chosen to execute this campaign was going to be asked to present 3 concepts. And that sounds pretty normal and the way people do business. But what are you basing that criteria on for choosing the right concept? And I go back to the chicken in the spandex suit on the rocket ship. If that's the sexiest thing they're seeing, then great, we all like this. But consensus in a room of people saying, I like that one versus those 2, is not scientific. You need criteria to base this stuff on. Consensus makes us feel good, but it's not scientific. Up there in the right-hand corner, the city of Buffalo wanted to increase recycling rates last year. I can tell Buffalo how to do that, not because I'm very smart, which certainly is not the case, but because of smart people like Doug Mackenzie Moore, who's done a lot of research in this area. But we didn't bid on this RFP. We would have loved to have done this because the RFP asked the prospective vendor what social media you're going to use, what channels you're going to use, what's your media strategy, on and on and on. And you don't know any of that until you've done your research. And so that's really kind of heartbreaking when you see stuff like that because you know you can help And the first thing you're going to have to do is fight people's perceptions about what should be done in terms of the whole ad agency approach. And last year, I gave away my punchline a little bit here, but the Vermont Energy Investment Corporation decided that in order to promote the use of electric vehicles in Vermont, they were going to film high-profile Vermonters driving electric vehicles around. This sounds like a really good idea. It sounds like social norm theory, but there are a couple problems with that. First, who do you know who drives electric vehicles? And George Clooney drives electric vehicles. And George Clooney is richer, more handsome, more famous, more beautiful than you or I. So at no time will we be driving an electric vehicle like George Clooney drives. He drives a Tesla. So this idea kind of tempts fate. It sounds like a really good idea, and I'm all on board with the idea. But the problem is it's creating a descriptive norm. And it's saying this is not you. And it's so close to being right. The idea is so close, it's almost there. And yet they're probably not going to be successful according to theory. So next, a few things. You don't have to solve the entire issue. If you try, I've seen this on the other end on bidding on RFPs. Here's our limited pot of money. How far can we stretch it? Science says get 20% of the way there, get 5% of the way there, get measurable change, get something that you can talk about and then wait till the next budget comes along. So that you're handing off something real to the next person. If you picture yourself as a runner, you want to hand off a baton to that next runner, not a banana. You give them something they can do something with. Earlier I mentioned what may seem like a long and expensive research process. It doesn't have to be. Evidence-based work doesn't have to be. Every social science tool you use gets you closer. So it reduces that I think syndrome. When you're talking about prospective vendors, ignore all the claims of success and all that stuff and the chicken in the spandex suit. Look at how they choose measures, check their process, check their quantifiable results. Insist on a measure, be patient. Because, again, getting part of the way there and having information that you got there that supports what you've done is way more exciting than pretending you got all the way there. And using kind of false or weak measures. Things to watch out for. One example of bad science is misusing focus groups. Focus groups are tough. I don't want to go into it a whole lot. They can be easily bungled, let's put it that way. Just as a for instance, recently I was talking with someone who had been in a focus group, and it was with youth. And he mentioned that he'd sat in the back of the room working on his smartphone during the focus group, wasn't conducting it. And at the end, kids were asking him, "Are you a cop?" It's like, wow, gee, there goes all your reliability of what you just found out. If people in the room are thinking this person is an authority figure. By the way, I actually really like focus groups. You just have to be very, very careful with them. Number two, information that doesn't help. The world's full of information, but there's a lot of bad information, and you want to make good decisions. It's hard to make good decisions with bad information. So rank your information. Poor measures include things like Facebook likes. Impressions is a really popular one in the advertising business. It's not a bad or it's a valid measure. It's just, if you say you got 11 million impressions, that's nice, but what does it mean? What can you do with that? And so rank your measures. Ranking your measures is going to prove vastly helpful to your cause. Just some perspective. Stuart Britt analyzed statements by major advertising agencies relating to the products they represent. He found in 99% of cases, campaign objectives were not stated in quantifiable terms. He found that stated campaign objectives and stated campaign outcomes did not match. And he found that 16% of the time the target audience was not even specified. James Twitchell talks about this in his book Ad Cult. The industry generates a lot of quasi-information, a lot of indications, a lot of half-facts This is not because advertising is full of bad people. It's because advertising is not science. It's more of an art, and art is open to interpretation. And I want to emphasize, I don't think this is a conspiracy. It's a different set of tools. As one ad agency president said to me once, we'd love to use research, our clients don't want to pay for it. It's kind of the end of the story. In the science world, research is all we want to use. I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit in the interest of time. The I think syndrome. This is what I wanted to remind you about one more time, because let me go back here first. In the advertising world, the CDC is starting to talk a lot about evidence-based. In the advertising world, people are starting to adopt evidence-based language. So I saw recently an agency was talking about the trans-theoretical model. Well, that's great, but unless you really have studied these things and you really are devoted to this, you're kind of putting lipstick on a pig, and that's probably not very kind to say. But as an example, the I think syndrome coming into effect here, I took a behavioral behavior science perspective on something that Efficiency Vermont had done, a campaign they had done. They took all these concepts from the behavior world, norming, loss frame, messaging, gain frame, I think a little bit, a couple other things, and they did them all in the same campaign, and they threw them against the wall to see what would stick. And great, you've taken step one, you're aware that behavior science exists, but you're not measuring, you're not pre-testing, you have no idea what happened with those messages. And that's the I think syndrome kind of coming back in. So I just try to give you a nice scary graphic of that. It's something that chocolate cake is really good and lobster is really good, but you don't put them together in a soup, and think you're going to end up with something that you like. Or another analogy, you can put on Tom Brady's jersey, but you're not going to throw like Tom Brady. So, behavior science is every project is custom built in the evidence-based approach. You can't call it proprietary or brand it. It's local focus, it's ethical considerations, it's careful data collection, and it's a set of really important tools. Now, because I've kind of beat up on ad agencies, I want to be clear about another thing. They're excellent for media strategy. I've seen some amazing things from ad agencies. A lot of really smart people working in media strategy. So behavior scientists working with media strategy, as happens with the tobacco effort with Rebecca. Good idea. Can work really well. Okay, now the I think syndrome. I want to show you this just because I love this. This is Marco Rubio. He told George Stephanopoulos a little under a year ago he was ready to be president. But he also said, I love this quote, "I do not believe that human activity is causing these dramatic changes to our climate the way these scientists are portraying it." I just love this quote from a rhetorical standpoint. It's one of those things where you're welcome to your own opinion, you're not welcome to your own facts. So the challenge for all of us is to not sound like the U.S. senator who in the same breath says climate science exists, but he doesn't believe it. So I'm really talking about us and our opinions and the I think syndrome. And Godzilla reminds us of that again. And campaign results from our campaign, I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit in the interest of time. What did we learn? A couple of really quick things. Number one, the combination of TV PSAs and tailored website multimedia added up to some very gratifying results regarding people's intention to get tested. Love to talk about this at length if you're ever interested. So we got a significant number of people to the website. From there, a significant number of people pressed a button saying, leading them to free testing locations. Number two, even bigger surprise. I love this. The Department of Health created sort of message compliant press release information, and they held 2 press events. Website visits, as well as the high quality visitors who went on to press that button about free testing centers, jumped. It almost doubled as a result of PR. So this is really interesting because the credibility went way up with PR. Pay-per-click didn't work in this campaign. The PR effort, huge. And that we're still exploring that, and I'm going to hopefully present that at a conference this fall, and that'll be included in a paper, a journal article for this I'm putting together too. So, to wrap up, my dream, 10 years from now, maybe 50 years from now, evidence-based health communication is going to be commonplace. The I think syndrome, the big idea, the pill in the hamburger approach, all these approaches are going to be seen as akin to putting butter on a burn or using mercury to cure syphilis. We face immense challenges. You know, you've kind of noticed our interests here. They're both environmental as well as health in this presentation. We face immense challenges in those realms. Those are all behavior-oriented problems. But I'm really excited because this generation, all of us here right now, finally have the tools to do this right. I was looking for those tools for the first 15 years of my career. A lot of great researchers have found out a lot of great things over the last 100 years, and they've applied that a lot over the last 30 years or so. So we have a great opportunity to make a difference. We just have to throw out the things we think we know and trust the science. A couple of things I mentioned today. This book, I just recommend this to everybody. Immensely readable, James Twitchell, Ad Cult, kind of gives you a big picture about how the ad industry works, but it's also about culture and cathedrals and medieval Europe and on and on. It's very interesting. Influence, cheesy cover graphics, but Robert Cialdini kind of breaks behavior science down, at least his part of it, into a bunch of concepts that are very readable, very interesting, fascinating stuff. And then Spent, if you ever want to get a little depressed about how we make consumer decisions as far as conspicuous displays for gaining mates or whatever, but very entertaining read as well. Here are some resources you don't have to spend money on. These really smart people here that I have met over the years at the Department of Health, and I've actually wrapped up with 4 minutes to go. And I want to emphasize again, this conversation doesn't have to end today. I really enjoy this work, and I'm happy to talk to anybody, anytime. Of course, entirely for free. So don't hesitate. So 3.5 minutes. Any questions?
Oh, sure. So the picture of the senator you showed and the issue of climate change and basically the underlying principle of relying on science, it comes up regularly in our work about that balance between, in terms of communication, of, what people think they know and what are facts. And then the question of having to simplify the message without dumbing it down. So is there something you would say about that in terms of keeping the integrity of that message and still having the persuasive power without losing basically the essence that you do have in science?
Yeah, my take on behavior science is incredibly complex. Again, not difficult, it's human, it's huge. My personal takeaway from my studies and reading and whatnot is that you don't worry about the science and you don't worry about the facts. You think about the proto-humans back there on the savannah, and there are many different behavior and persuasion theories out there. So you do pick them based on the scenario, and they're widely divergent. I tend toward the whole social norms kind of thing a bit myself, but it's not for every situation. So the first way I look at it is kind of the Jenny McCarthy problem. You don't go through or over Jenny McCarthy, you go around Jenny McCarthy. And so, I would love to get involved with an immunization project, for instance, to study it, because it won't be about the facts, I can tell you that. It won't be about, oh, look what happened in California and measles and all that stuff. That's going to work for a bunch of people, but it's not going to work for everybody. There are deeper, really interesting cultural things going on where people are questioning science, and these are really intelligent people in a lot of cases. People who think they're doing the best for their kids, and so you say, okay, what culturally can we talk about that helps you to understand, helps you to have a different perspective on what's good for your kids? So that's the way I would start to look at that stuff. But Bill McKibben's got all the facts. I don't think he's doing any good. I'm sorry if he sees this. I think Bill McKibben's awesome, but the rhetoric is all preaching to the people who are already converted. And and I just don't think you can do that past a point, you know, so your facts being better than somebody else's, you know, you're not going to win that battle because, again, tribal identification is so strong with people. But, I mean, I have a lot of hope about that. It's not unhopeful. I think this is great. Look, let's stop trying to do it this way, you know?
But let's not be confused about what Matt's talking about. What Matt's talking about here and what we do a lot in the health department is the science and the evidence base for action. We're not talking about making all of our messages science messages.
Right.
Because people are very emotional, and when they make their decisions about their behavior, they're not always based on science, and we all know that because how many times have we told people to stop smoking, and how many times have we told people to eat less? You know, people make behavior decisions emotionally. So what we're talking about here is making sure that the campaigns and the messages are developed with science and behavior change theory behind it, but not that every message that we put out there is a data point.
Yeah, because you don't want to, people are very, very busy, and you don't want to assume they have the cognitive space to absorb your facts. It's a presumption we all make because we like to think we're logical, but if you start thinking, okay, we're not necessarily logical, then okay, maybe we don't wake up in the morning thinking about how can I be healthier today, or how can I do something better. You know, there are other routes to get people to change. It's not that facts and logic don't work, they certainly work. It's just once you get rid of that part of the herd that you've convinced because of those facts, then you've got a lot more people to work on. So I know we're at 9:31, and so I don't want to keep anybody here beyond where they have to go, but I'm also happy to hang out and if anyone has any questions afterwards. But thank you very much for being here today and listening to me, and I enjoy talking about this stuff. So have a good day.